It happened fast. In a move that sent markets spinning and allies scrambling, U.S. President Donald Trump announced a 50% tariff on all imported copper. No delays, no debate, just one bold declaration that flipped the global copper market on its head. Within minutes, copper prices exploded to a never-before-seen $5.95 per pound, and by the end of the trading session, futures had jumped 13%, the steepest one-day rise in copper's history. But what started as an aggressive trade policy is now spiraling out of control. Factories are bracing for shock, car prices are climbing, and America's top copper partner, Canada, isn't backing down. In fact, Ottawa is now preparing its boldest retaliation yet. If you're following this story closely, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and hit the bell so you're always ahead of the curve. Now, let's break down how a single tariff decision triggered an economic earthquake that may reshape the future of North American trade. It all began during a cabinet meeting in Washington, where Trump casually stated that copper tariffs would jump to 50% starting August 1st. His tone was firm, and his message was clear: protect American manufacturing at any cost. But within minutes, copper futures in New York soared to $5.95 per pound. The announcement sent traders into a frenzy and instantly created an arbitrage gap. U.S. copper prices surged 25% above the London Metal Exchange. That's an unheard-of spread, one that opens the door to price manipulation, supply chaos, and trade confusion on both sides of the border. The pressure immediately hit Canada. With over $9 billion in copper exports annually, and a major share of that heading south, Canada's copper industry was thrown into uncertainty. Most of this copper comes from mines in British Columbia and Quebec, shipped to Asian smelters before coming back to North America as refined metal. But now, with U.S. tariffs spiking overnight, that return journey suddenly looks a lot more expensive. Prime Minister Mark Carney quickly stepped in, vowing to defend Canadian workers and industries. His message to the White House was firm: Canada won't be bullied. Trade officials began exploring options, from filing a formal complaint at the WTO to rerouting shipments away from the U.S. altogether. On the ground, Canadian companies wasted no time. Teck Resources, one of Canada's largest miners, activated a plan to bypass U.S. buyers. Instead of shipping copper back into the States, they're now redirecting exports to South Korea and China. The message is simple: if the U.S. raises costs, Canada will find new customers. But this isn't just about copper miners. It's about your daily life. According to analysts from Cox Automotive, even a 25% copper duty could add $6,000 to the price of a Canadian-built car. At 50%, that surcharge could easily rise into 5 figures. And that's before other costs like steel, aluminum, and transport are factored in. The electric vehicle industry is especially exposed. EVs use nearly 80 kilograms of copper per vehicle, about 4 times what's needed in a gasoline car. So, when copper prices rise, so does the total cost of EV production. Tesla, Ford, GM, they all feel it. Every 5-cent increase in copper adds nearly $90 in raw material costs per car. Multiply that by thousands of vehicles, and it becomes millions in added expenses per month. Infrastructure projects are also at risk. High-voltage transmission lines require tons of copper per mile. Biden's ambitious grid upgrades could now cost hundreds of millions more than expected. Utility companies might delay upgrades or request emergency rate hikes. Either way, it's consumers who end up footing the bill. Trump's administration argues that the tariff is about protecting national security. They say the U.S. has become too dependent on foreign copper and needs to rebuild its own supply chain. But there's a catch: America doesn't refine enough copper domestically to meet current demand. That's why half of its copper comes from imports. Now, every one of those pounds will carry a steep tax, the same tax rate usually reserved for luxury cars and yachts. Meanwhile, trade negotiations are on pause. The original deadline for side deals with allies like Canada and the EU was July 9th. But with Northwest agreements in place, the White House pushed the deadline to August 1st, buying time, but also increasing pressure. This move, some analysts say, is textbook Trump: create chaos, force the other side to the table, and try to extract a better deal. But this time, Canada isn't playing along. Wall Street didn't wait long to react. Copper futures spiked more than 12% by July 8th, and investment firms began issuing warnings. UBS estimated that U.S. manufacturers could face an extra $4.2 billion in costs this quarter alone if prices remain elevated. That kind of hit could reduce GDP growth by up to 0.5 percentage point, a major blow for an economy still fighting inflation and trying to recover post-COVID. And this goes beyond manufacturing. According to housing market data, tariffs on copper, steel, and lumber have already added $17,000 to $22,000 to the cost of a new home. First-time homebuyers are being priced out. A report from the National Association of Home Builders revealed that the copper surcharge alone now accounts for nearly $11,000 in construction costs per single-family home. That's enough to stall projects in cities and towns across the U.S. Back in Canada, the focus is shifting from protest to pivot. On March 31st, Statistics Canada reported a major jump in exports to non-U.S. markets, up 24.8%, while exports to the U.S. fell 6.6%. That's a significant shift and signals that Canada is no longer waiting for Washington to come around. They're already building new trade routes, new alliances, and new customers. In fact, Canadian officials have flown to Lima and Santiago to discuss copper deals with South American buyers. At home, industry leaders are quietly pushing Ottawa to eliminate export permit fees, essentially subsidizing companies to look eastward, rather than south. It's not just a trade adjustment, it's a strategic overhaul. But Ottawa still holds a trump card of its own. On July 22, at precisely 12:01 a.m., Canada is set to unleash a $125 billion tariff retaliation, a sweeping measure that could target U.S. pharmaceuticals, tech products, and agricultural goods. If the copper tariff isn't rolled back, that counterstrike goes live. And once it does, the trade war won't just be about metals. It will touch medicine, food, electronics, everything. Now, rewind just a few weeks. On June 30th, in a bid to calm tensions, Canada scrapped its 3% digital services tax, a levy that was expected to raise over $5.9 billion over 5 years. The hope was that this olive branch would revive stalled trade talks and avoid another tariff spiral. And for a moment, it looked like the gamble might work. But then came Trump's tariff bombshell, and suddenly the goodwill evaporated. Even more shocking were the warnings that followed. U.S. trade officials stated clearly that if Canada doesn't comply with new trade terms, pharmaceuticals could be hit with tariffs up to 200%. That's not just a threat, it's economic warfare. And Canada knows it. Still, the bigger question is, will American voters tolerate it? As prices rise, cars get more expensive, homes get harder to buy, and utility bills climb. It's the average person who ends up paying for these trade wars. Trump may see tariffs as leverage. But for working families already squeezed by inflation, they feel more like a punishment. In just a matter of days, this copper tariff has gone from policy decision to global disruption. We've seen record high prices, factories bracing for shock, and Canada building new routes that bypass the U.S. entirely. And this may only be the beginning. If Canada fires back on July 22, it could escalate quickly. A tit-for-tat spiral could bring in the EU, China, and other global markets. U.S. companies could find themselves isolated, paying more for materials, while rivals abroad enjoy cheaper deals. Supply chains could fracture beyond repair. Trump's hope, of course, is that this move forces allies to cave, to take the hit, agree to new terms, and continue business as usual. But Canada's response shows a different story. They're not just pushing back. They're planning a future where the U.S. is no longer the dominant trade partner. The clock is ticking. With just days left before Canada's countermeasure activates, the world is watching to see who blinks first. Will Trump retreat in the face of mounting pressure? Or will he double down and risk triggering a full-scale trade war that spirals beyond his control? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Was the copper tariff a bold move or a massive misstep? Do you think Canada's retaliation will go through, or will there be a last-minute truce? Your comment might just predict the next headline. And if you're still watching, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, like this video, and hit the bell icon. We're here to break down the politics, power moves, and real-world impacts, so you're never left in the dark.